The U.S. economy is facing a massive tariff storm worth $60 billion from major countries. Canada and the EU have retaliated, increasing the pressure on the U.S. economy. Since Trump decided to impose a 25% tariff on aluminum and steel, both Canada and the EU have not hesitated to implement retaliatory measures. Canada, a country with deep trade ties to the U.S., has imposed retaliatory tariffs on goods worth up to $16.6 billion, including products from steel, aluminum, and various consumer goods. Particularly, the tariffs on imported aluminum and steel from the U.S. will have a significant impact on key U.S. industries such as automotive and construction. Recent data from the World Trade Organization, WTO, shows that Trump's tariff policies have started to visibly harm U.S. industries. For instance, just 1 month after the tariffs were imposed, U.S. exports to major partners like the EU and Canada dropped significantly. Steel production in the U.S. also recorded an 8% decrease in the first quarter of 2025, one of the sharpest declines in the past 5 years. U.S. businesses, particularly those in steel and aluminum manufacturing, are facing skyrocketing material costs and fierce competition from other countries. The European Union is also taking action. The EU has imposed retaliatory tariffs worth $28 billion on U.S. products, including items like cars, wine, and agricultural products. What's noteworthy is that in addition to tariffs, the EU has implemented a long-term strategy to protect its own industries and reduce dependence on the U.S. market. This action from the EU signals that they are seeking a more independent path, which could have far-reaching effects on future trade relations between the U.S. and European countries. These moves by Canada and the EU are not only disrupting U.S. industries, but are also causing a loss of confidence among investors in the U.S. government's economic policies. According to reports from J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs, the U.S. stock market has seen its largest drop in 6 months since the 2008 financial crisis. The S&P 500 index has decreased by 12%, while the Dow Jones has fallen by 10%, reflecting instability in the U.S. economy. The effects are not limited to large corporations, but have spread to U.S. consumers as well. Prices for consumer products, from cars to electronics, have increased by 5% to 15% due to these tariffs. This adds more pressure on consumers, especially middle-income family. Economists predict that if this situation continues, the U.S. economy may fall into a recession in the last quarter of 2025. Furthermore, the rising cost of living could reduce purchasing power, leading to a drop in consumer demand and impacting economic recovery. Without timely intervention, this situation could push many individuals into financial hardship. Since the trade war began, there has been division not only among international partners but also within the U.S. itself. Experts argue that without a change in policy, the U.S. could continue facing a loss of confidence from its allies and a major risk of a global economic recession. IMF forecasts indicate that if the trade war persists, global economic growth will slow, and the U.S. economy could shrink by up to 2% in 2026. This will affect key industries and directly impact people's lives, with higher prices and fewer job opportunities. If the U.S. does not find a solution, this instability could continue to spread worldwide. While there are many pessimistic forecasts, there is still a possibility that the U.S. will find a way to resolve the situation. Negotiations between the U.S. and its international partners will continue, and in a volatile world, reaching fairer trade agreements could help stabilize the economy and restore international relations. However, this requires a major adjustment in policies and a long-term strategy rather than short-term decisions. Can the U.S. overcome this tariff storm? Will Trump's trade decisions help the U.S. economy recover, or will they lead the country into a prolonged recession? Trump shocks America with a 200% wine tariff. How will Americans react? Can you imagine walking into a supermarket one day and realizing your favorite bottle of wine now costs 3 times as much? This is no longer a hypothetical scenario. Trump has just announced a staggering 200% tariff on wine and champagne from Europe. A decision that has sent shockwaves across the country, pushing millions of Americans into even greater financial strain as prices continue to soar. Trump sparks controversy with a 200% tariff. Look at this number, 200% tariffs on imported European wine. This isn't just a small increase, it's a massive shock to the wine industry and millions of American consumers. The decision came immediately after the European Union, EU, imposed a 50% tariff on American whiskey. In response, Trump struck back aggressively, imposing the highest ever import taxes on European wine, champagne, and alcoholic beverages. But this isn't just about a trade dispute. It directly affects a crucial voting bloc: suburban middle-class women, a demographic that played a major role in the last election. Backlash from women voters. When wine is no longer an easy choice. Think about it. Wine has long been a staple in the daily lives of millions of Americans, especially housewives, middle-class families, and business professionals. Now, with this new tariff, the price of imported wine could triple. What does this mean? A French wine bottle that used to cost $15 may now be $45 or more. Restaurants, bars, and liquor stores will face higher costs, leading to steep price hikes. Women voters, a key electoral group, are feeling the direct impact. So here's the question: will this decision cost Trump support among suburban voters? Because the reality is, these voters were instrumental in past elections. Now, they are facing price surges not only in wine, but in a wide range of products due to the ripple effects of this trade war. The economy takes a hit, the dangerous escalation of the tariff war. Trump's decision isn't just affecting wine lovers, it's having serious consequences for the U.S. economy. In the past few days, the stock market has taken a major hit. The Dow Jones dropped 350 points in a single day, wiping out 1% of its market value. Nasdaq fell by more than 1%, signaling investor panic. Economic experts warn, if the trade war escalates, the U.S. economy could face an even deeper recession. But why is the market reacting so strongly? Because businesses and investors crave stability, not uncertainty. An endless tariff war could lead to sharp increases in consumer prices, disruptions in global supply chains, difficulties for American businesses exporting goods due to retaliatory tariffs. So, will Trump adjust his strategy to prevent further economic damage? Trump refuses to back down, despite market panic. What have we seen so far? A growing trade war, a plummeting economy, and voter anxiety. Yet, Trump remains firm in his stance. When asked about the economic fallout, he declared, "We don't need their wine. They need us, not the other way around." He insists that America can produce everything it needs, despite the fact that the U.S. economy still heavily relies on global supply chains. But there's a major problem. The U.S. does not currently produce enough wine to replace European imports. American wineries cannot meet the surge in demand overnight. Domestic production costs are higher, which means U.S.-made wine prices will also increase. In other words, Americans will still pay more, whether they buy imported or domestic wine. The consequences of Trump's trade policy. How much more can Americans endure? The truth is, Trump's tariff decisions aren't new, but this time they are hitting the wallets of millions of Americans directly. Consider this. Food prices have already surged dramatically in recent months. The cost of living is rising while wages remain stagnant. Investors are panicking, causing further stock market losses. Will this be a turning point for independent voters who are now reconsidering their stance? Don't look away, because what happens next might just shock you. Trade collapses, education is dismantled, social welfare is slashed, and all of this stems from Donald Trump's policies. While America waits for solutions to inflation and economic instability, Trump is making things worse than ever. But the question is, do Americans still trust Trump and the Republican Party after everything that's happening? Trump is turning America's allies into economic rivals, pushing the country toward a trade crisis. Trump raised tariffs on imported aluminum and steel by 25%, targeting major trade partners like the EU, Canada, and Mexico. The EU immediately retaliated, imposing tariffs on American goods, including cars, 20%, whiskey, 25%, and agricultural products, 30%. U.S. exports suffered massive losses, with American companies losing over $15 billion in revenue in the first year of the trade war. Economists warn that inflation continues to rise as consumers pay more for imported goods. The consequences? Consumer prices surged by 12% over 2 years. Thousands of manufacturing jobs were lost, especially in Midwestern states like Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin. Trump's approval ratings in agricultural states dropped by 9% as farmers faced retaliatory tariffs from China and Europe. Not only is Trump wrecking the economy, but he is also directly attacking the education system through unprecedented actions. Over 50% of the Department of Education's staff was fired, severely impacting federal programs that support schools. The Trump administration staged a fake security emergency, forcing employees to evacuate their offices, only to lock them out permanently. Funding for programs supporting students with disabilities was slashed by 40%, leaving 6 million children without necessary assistance. Low-income students suffered as well, with the school lunch assistance program losing 30% of its budget. Real-world impact. Public schools in Texas, Florida, and Ohio warned of budget shortages, leading to potential teacher layoffs and larger class sizes. Dropout rates among students with disabilities increased by 18% in just 6 months under the new policies. Former Department of Education officials spoke out. This isn't just budget cuts. It's a deliberate attack on equal access to education. Trump claims to love America, but his policies are pushing millions into crisis. Trump cut $880 billion from Medicaid, which provides health care for over 80 million low-income Americans. 70,000 employees at the Department of Veterans Affairs, VA, were laid off, despite 19 million veterans needing medical care. 7,000 employees at the Social Security Administration were fired, causing massive delays in processing retirement and disability benefits. The real impact: over 4 million Americans lost health insurance within a year. VA hospitals in New York, California, and Texas became overwhelmed, with wait times doubling. People with disabilities now wait an average of 12 months for benefits, compared to 6 months previously. A veteran speaks out. I fought for this country, but now I have to fight just to get health care. Trump isn't protecting us. He's abandoning us. Americans are waking up to the truth. Trump isn't protecting them. He's exploiting them to enrich the elite. Democratic lawmakers called it the greatest political scam in history. Trump pretends to stand with the working class, but in reality, his policies only favor billionaires. A new poll shows that 45% of former Trump voters now feel betrayed. Protests erupted across the U.S., especially in Washington, New York, and Chicago, demanding an end to social welfare cuts. Americans have a choice: continue letting Trump and the Republican Party destroy the country, or stand up and reclaim their rights. Don't go anywhere. What's coming next will keep you glued to the screen and definitely make you rethink everything. The U.S. imposes a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports. France retaliates immediately. Trade tensions escalate, threatening to disrupt global supply chains. Not just France, but the entire European Union, EU, steps in, preparing countermeasures. Could this be the beginning of a full-scale trade war between the U.S. and Europe? On February 10th, 2025, President Donald Trump imposed a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports, aiming to protect U.S. domestic industries from foreign competition. However, this policy shocked America's trade partners, especially Europe. Within 1 month, France struck back, enacting severe trade restrictions against the U.S. French Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot made it clear: we will not allow Washington to impose trade policies on the European economy. Immediate consequences: U.S.-France trade relations reach an all-time low. Both European and American automakers suffer due to supply chain disruptions. The EU intervenes, considering retaliatory tariffs on U.S. products, further escalating the conflict. Steel and aluminum are crucial for car manufacturing, accounting for over 70% of a vehicle's weight. With tariffs in place, European production costs surged by 15 to 20%. Major European automakers affected: Renault and Peugeot, France; Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz, Germany. Economic impact: car prices in the EU are expected to rise by $3,000 to $5,000 per vehicle. European car sales could decline by 8% in 2025. Over 50,000 jobs in France and Germany are at risk. The ripple effect on U.S. car makers. Surprisingly, American automakers are not spared. Ford and General Motors, which import parts from Europe, face increased production costs, reducing profitability. Supply chain slowdowns affecting manufacturing output. Industry calls for a resolution. As both American and European automakers feel the pressure, industry leaders urge Washington and Brussels to negotiate a solution. But neither side is willing to back down. Amid rising tensions with the U.S., France actively seeks new trade partnerships, and China becomes the preferred ally. France is strengthening trade ties with China. By 2023, trade between France and China reached nearly $79 billion, marking a 25% increase from the previous year. By 2025, French companies strengthened ties with China, focusing on electric vehicle EV technology, aerospace and aviation, agriculture and food exports, strategic agreements. Renault and Peugeot secured partnerships with Chinese giants BYD and CATL, gaining access to advanced battery technology, reducing reliance on U.S. suppliers. Joint EV manufacturing deals, expanding their presence in the Asian market. Macron's vision for economic independence. French President Emmanuel Macron emphasizes the need for trade diversification. France's economic future cannot depend solely on the United States. Strengthening our ties with China opens new doors for innovation and sustainable growth. This move signals a major shift in global economic alliances challenging U.S. trade dominance. Not just France, the entire European Union is preparing to retaliate. The EU's response to U.S. tariffs. The European Commission is reviewing countermeasures against U.S. imports, including increasing tariffs on American car imports, potentially up to 20 to 30%. Taxing U.S. coal and liquefied natural gas LNG, restricting access to EU aviation and tech markets for U.S. companies. President Emmanuel Macron issues a strong statement. Europe cannot allow its economy to be dictated by unilateral decisions from Washington. If these countermeasures are implemented, a full-scale trade war could erupt, affecting industries worldwide. 151,000 new jobs, but there's something very wrong about this number. And no, this is not a good announcement. Let's start with the recent jobs report. The U.S. economy only created 151,000 new jobs, far below the expected 200,000 jobs. This is truly a shock, especially when we're still not fully recovered from the pandemic, and inflation is still pressing hard on everyone. This report only covers up to February 15th, and more importantly, it doesn't include the 10,000 government jobs cut, a number we'll see more clearly in the full report in March. But don't forget, what's happening now is the result of policies that have caused millions of workers to lose their jobs, including thousands of jobs in the manufacturing and service industries. When you look at it, this number doesn't just reflect the job market. It also reflects the weakness of Trump's economic policies. This economy is now struggling to keep pace, like a ship unable to ride the waves, without a steady helm. And unless there's a clear change, we could be facing a challenging future, possibly even an economic recession. So, when Trump was questioned about the tariffs, what happened? In an interview with Maria Bartiromo,
I think so, but the tariffs could go up as time goes by, and they may go up, and I don't know if it's predictable.
Trump gave a vague response about continuing to raise tariffs. Tariffs may go up over time, he said, but he didn't provide any clear plan for the businesses struggling with this uncertainty. CEOs have asked for clarity because they need to plan for investment and spending. But Trump only gave confusing comments about globalization and America's thieves. This doesn't just leave investors confused. It also creates an unpredictable atmosphere in the economy. The economic detox story initiated by the Trump administration is really just a big joke. They're trying to say that the current difficulties are just a detox process, like a temporary strategy to cleanse the body after harmful effects. Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, used this term in a recent interview, saying the economy is shifting from public spending to private spending, and it will have to go through a painful temporary phase. But ask a regular worker how they feel about this detox process when they're struggling to pay bills and keep their job. The truth is, the term detox is just an excuse for failure to address fundamental economic issues. When we look at the financial situation, the instability is clear. Reports from companies like Costco show a decline in consumer spending, and we haven't even touched on the collapse of the stock market. The banking sector, with names like Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, and JP Morgan, has seen a serious drop in stock prices, with indices falling between 7 to 12%. This only makes one thing clearer. While the wealthy continue to hold on to their assets, the majority of Americans are still struggling with rising living costs and instability in employment. Finally, what concerns us is the international position of the U.S. under Trump's leadership. We're seeing an increasingly noticeable alienation from our traditional allies, and some countries like Poland are preparing for the possibility of war. This not only causes the U.S. to lose crucial international relationships, but also creates a world full of risks and uncertainty. Trump's foreign policy isn't just ineffective, it's isolating us. We're no longer the leading superpower on global issues. And now, we're being pulled into dangerous relationships with countries like Russia and North Korea. And this becomes even more serious when countries like Poland and other allies have to prepare to face the possibility of war, while the U.S. stands on the sidelines, no longer a solid foundation for international alliances.